You're not supposed to work for your law firm. Your law firm is a business. Your business is supposed to work for you.
You're listening to the Profit First for Lawyers podcast, the official companion show to the book Profit First for Lawyers by RJon Robins. Now, this podcast is for you if you want to bring home more profit while working fewer hours in the office, spending even more time with your loved ones, and turning your office into a lean, mean, profit-breathing machine. So if you're tired of working for your law firm instead of your law firm working for you, stay tuned for some really practical insights that will get you the results you've always wanted. It's time to put your BS aside for the next few minutes and put yourself, your family, your firm, and your profit first. Welcome back to the Profit First for Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Carly, and today I am in studio with the fabulous Matt Loker. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Carly. I appreciate it.
I am super excited to have you in studio today. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your firm, and what kinds of clients do you help?
Absolutely. No, and thanks again. Yeah, so I'm Matt Loker. I own Loker Law, and we hold companies accountable who think they're going to get away with it. So specifically what we're doing is we're focusing on representing victims of identity theft and fraud. And when they come along, they speak with the business says, no, this is your debt. This is your charge. That's when we come in and we file the lawsuit. So you've been going for about 6 years as a firm, 7 years as a firm.
I love that part of your magic statement that think they're going to get away with it. How very interesting. What got you invested in this corner of law?
It was really a specific client. So for me, when I was becoming an attorney, I thought that I was going to do like sports law. I grew up playing sports, played at a fairly high level. Then I got, it's hockey, got my 8th concussion, and the doctor's like, this isn't for you. You're going to be in a wheelchair, a vegetable, and all those sorts of things. And this was before like CTE got big. But in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be a lawyer. So, once sports were over, look at that route. And I was working at a different firm, and we were representing some theater actors, doing whatever came through the door. And then we had one client in particular, and, she was 60 years old herself, but her mom, who was in her 80s or 90s, she was a victim of identity theft. Super sad story. Live-in caregivers stole her identity, bought a couple of sports cars, took out student loans in her name. And she's, for lack of a better term, like she is completely incompetent, can't do anything. So she's not driving the sports cars. She's not going to school. So we just got really, really close. The leading up to this, the client said she talked to 20 or 30 other attorneys. Everyone said, no, file bankruptcy, can't help you. And from there, just like getting into the academic side of things, like what does it take to litigate these cases? That was just a spark. And I was like, I want to do this every single day for every single client. And now it's all we focus on.
Oh, Matt, that is, number one, a gut-wrenching story, but kind of a really cool, hero origin story.
That's what it feels like.
It's like some DC Gotham City kind of, no, this is not okay. And
Exactly.
If nobody else can help, then I'm going to be the one to figure it out. And you said that you've had your firm for almost 7 years?
Yeah, started December 2019, and then the world shut down for COVID. So that was
I was going to say, great time to start.
It actually ended up being a good time because, things were quieter. So I had time to think about the business. Like, what do we want to do with it? And then also beyond that, because it was COVID and people didn't have a lot of other things to do, they were looking at their credit. They were dealing with like the fraud and the issues that they kind of just put off. So when everything shut down, like you mentioned, it's my wife and we have 2 daughters. My wife stays home with the girls. We were, pretty concerned, but it ended up being quite a busy time for us. So it worked out, and here we are.
That's great. Can I ask then, Matt, how long have you been taking your profits first?
I just started doing that in the last like 2-ish years. I'm trying to think. I was trying to remember when I read the book, and it's in the last year or two, and that just to jump right into it, certainly changed quite a bit. So what we were doing before, my wife and I, we would, pay ourselves last. So we had our salary, of course, but in terms of, the other perks of being a business owner, really the reward for taking the risk to start a business, that was always the most ambiguous part, talking about the total owner benefit, the TOB. And we would just wait until the end of the year, and we'd always be wondering, how much are we going to pay ourselves this year? What sort of, bonus are we going to get? Sometimes it was a good amount. Sometimes it wasn't a whole lot because I was always just, making sure everyone else got paid. But the flip, profit first, that's given it more structure, and we can plan so much better by having a set way of paying ourselves these bonuses and having that separate account where we don't touch it. It's there. We know what's coming. And it's such a small, simple change, but it's made a massive difference for peace of mind.
I'm going to pursue this very hard in this episode as a whole because I want to hear all about it. I know that you did bring a clip from the studio today, so let's go ahead and watch that first. Do you want to just give us a little teaser before we play it?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of the clip, for me, in like every sort of business book, there's always some nugget that stands out, like some big takeaway lesson. And this clip, it reminds me of what I liked most about Profit First, and also what I liked most about How to Manage, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But it gives a different way to look at your business and what it should be doing for you. And that's why this one always resonated with me.
Yeah, look at your business and what it should be doing for you. Okay, I'm excited. Let's go ahead. Let's roll the clip.
Your law firm isn't your baby. You're not supposed to work for your law firm. Your law firm is a business. Your business is supposed to work for you. Now, I've been having this conversation with thousands and thousands and thousands of lawyers for going on a few decades now. And I have found that there's a much more practical, much more professional, much more ethical, and a much more profitable analogy to use than that of a parent and child when thinking about one's relationship with your law firm and you as the owner of the law firm. The best analogy that I have figured out 20 years ago is the farmer and the mule. Think about why the farmer has a mule. The farmer has a mule so that the mule can pull the farmer's plow. And why does the farmer care about having the plow pulled? Well, the farmer wants to have the plow pulled so the farmer can grow crops. And why does the farmer care about growing crops? Because the farmer wants to feed the farmer's family. And if the farmer manages the mule well, manages the crop rotations well, and does the job right, there should be hopefully enough crops left over after feeding the farmer's family. See, profit first. Feed your family first. Then you can take the crops and share them with everyone else by taking them to market and selling them. Now, does this mean that you can abuse the mule? No, you can't abuse the mule if you expect the mule to operate at peak performance. Can you neglect the mule? No, you can't neglect the mule, not if you want the mule to operate at peak performance. You still have to train, feed, house, care for, and manage the mule if you want the mule to do its job for you and your family. But you ought not be taking pride in how many hours you spend in the barn with the mule.
I remember this clip in the studio, and, RJon had told me, like, this is one of those analogies that people genuinely get mad about. So I kind of love that you brought this today. Why this clip specifically? Why did this one speak to you?
Yeah, and there's so much there. So, when I, pre RJon, pre How to Manage, I, like everyone else, would always say, like, the business is my baby. I nurture the baby, put all my time in the baby. So that's always like how I thought of things. But then, growing up in Ohio and now in San Luis Obispo, which is an agricultural town, hearing that and looking around and seeing the interaction between the farmers, their mules, workers, what have you, that really clicked for me and changed my perspective of going from, I'm the only one that can do this. I'm the best attorney in this area of the law. I have to do everything. But if you look at a farm, if the farmer was doing everything, the crops would die. They wouldn't be able to have a business. So that just helped me focus more on the team and the growth and treating the business properly, as opposed to like how I would, treat my children, see my babies and those sorts of things.
I really appreciate that you brought that up too, because I got such a visceral image. And obviously, I've heard this analogy many hundred times at this point, right? Being as deeply involved in this book as I am. But I hadn't really stopped to consider, right? Like, what happens if a farmer insists on doing all the work themselves? The world at large would not be fed.
Exactly.
Right? Because one person cannot do enough good to keep everybody who is not farming fed. And so I really appreciate that you took that analogy a little bit, just a step further for me, Matt, because I think that's one of the most underrated things that law firm owners who run unprofitable law firms really don't think about, right? Is that if your law firm's unprofitable, you can't help as many people. You can't feed as many people who are not themselves farmers or lawyers.
No matter how hard you're working, as another example, between San Luis Obispo and San Jose, that's about 3 hours. It is purely farmlands between the two. Like, there's, tiny cities that pop up here and there, but it is all farmland. So if that farmer is doing it by themselves, they could work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every single day of the year, but never cover all of that farmland. They might do a great job on like the specific patches that they're focused on, but the rest is dying. Things have to be neglected because it is just physically impossible to cover it's hundreds of miles. So I forget how far it is, but it takes about 3.5 hours. And that's the same thing for the business. I could do pretty well by myself, and I could do well. But there's a finite amount of people that we could help. And then as a result, a finite amount of money that we could, bring in for the business. So by expanding, we're helping a lot more people nationwide now. And all of those people are, in my opinion, getting good services because of this is our niche and this is what we focus on.
Now, you said that you realized that you wanted or needed something more, right? I can't grow the business any more than it already is by myself. Was there a specific tipping point? Like, hey, this thing happened specifically that made me go, I have got to screw my ego and look for something else. What was that part? The part that made you want to go look for a different solution?
Yeah. So in terms of finding, a business coach, I realized that I grew the business to the most I could do. I could either work 24/7 and grow up more, or I could get some insight as to like how to create a better business that will allow us to both expand, help more people, increase our revenue, while also having a semblance of a life. I didn't want to be at my desk all the time, banging away at the keyboard and doing the things all the time. But I realized with growth, we could do more across the board and everyone could have a personal life. So that was a major shift for me, going from I'm just a solo practitioner to running a business. And really, like the Profit First was the next iteration of that. So, the business is going well, the revenue is coming in, people are happy, and there's always like a larger pool of money. But as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing that I'm not reaping the benefits, the rewards for creating the business and bringing more money. So then I realized that I needed to learn more about finances. I didn't have that education in school, as we all know. Didn't get it from my parents. So I had to learn, how do I ensure that I can get this money to protect my family and my kids' generation and so on and so forth. So I just needed a different type of coach when it came to money, specifically focusing on that and how to work with it.
Yeah. Matt, do you mind giving us a snapshot before and after of kind of the gross revenue of the firm before you started Profit First and how many clients approximately you were able to help versus what you're looking at today, even only 1 to 2 years later?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, with the Profit First, we're going back a couple more years. Like when we joined How to Manage, we're at, $1 million, and it was just me. We had hired an associate, and at my first LQM, the live quarterly meeting, we had our first paralegal was going to start right after that. We're currently, tracking to hit 5 million. And the difference is, as the team grows, what I was doing before Profit First is our revenue was going up. Everyone else was getting paid. My compensation was staying the same, sometimes going down actually. But now by focusing on Profit First, the revenue is still going up. The team is still growing. However, we're getting the return on the stress and making those tough decisions about spending money to hire, spending money for equipment in a larger factory and all those sorts of things. So, it's added multiple 6 figures to my income.
So I love that because while your revenues are still growing, right, it is important to make sure that you have a percentage for yourself, for your family, to feed your family with those crops you're growing.
Because otherwise, you might as well just be an employee somewhere if you're not receiving any of those benefits. And it's a mindset shift, because I think a lot of the the business information that's out there, people are always talking about, at least in the books that I read and the things I've listened to, talking about not taking any disbursements or profits, or not even paying themselves anything until the business gets to a certain level. But then you're always chasing. It's always like, well, my business is there, but I'm not ready to pay myself, so I'm not going to take any disbursements yet. But by doing it this way, really what was the biggest surprise to me is that I could do both. I could still pay myself the reasonable salary plus the profits plus grow. And it just seems like that unicorn, like the perfect set of both worlds where you could do this and still see it. So everyone's, driving the ship the same way, and everyone's getting paid. Employees are getting paid, the clients are getting paid. It's working out, which I just, I first listened to the book, I was like, okay, great. We'll see what actually happens. I feel like I'm going to hit a cash crunch now. But, with more money in operating, we have.
That's fantastic. And speaking of your clients, what has been some of the biggest differences for your clientele since you made this change?
Really just, we're, as a team, we're driving more, we're fighting harder. Some of that comes with, experience and winning some verdicts and those sorts of things. But with the team's focus on this, when we profit, our clients profit. So we're a contingency firm. And before, it's easier to say, well, if there's X amount of dollars on a table, it's a good deal, and maybe we'll just wrap it up. But when we're driving and litigating towards, the goals that we have for the case, the defendant's either going to get there or we're going to go to trial. And with a different mentality focused on that, on the profits and the return for us and the client, the numbers are going up across the board. Of course, the clients are happier, the fraud's gone, it's off their credit. So it's been a win-win uniformly.
Yeah. I love that viewpoint too, that when you have your specific goal, you're fighting harder. And I don't know, this might be too far off the beaten path, but it kind of makes me think like when you're in sports and they tell you, 10 more reps when you're doing your workouts or whatever. If you didn't have a number or a goal that you were fighting towards, you might give up on yourself sooner than if you know that my goal is in sight.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it makes sense, because if you're just working out or practicing for a sport, you might feel done way earlier than you should. Similar sort of thing for our cases. We had $500,000 on the table for a particular mediation, and that's, a good result, but we were 7 figures or bust. Lo and behold, the defendant gets up to 7 figures. So there's alignment in the goals and everything we're doing, and it's been increasing the value across the board.
Yeah, and it sounds like your clients have been a lot better off too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, more money in their pocket. People are, financing homes, or they're getting checks for multiple 6 figures themselves. $500,000. So it works out for everybody.
Can I take you like far, far, far back in time when you first started your firm or decided to hang out your own shingle? Did you have any like goals or dreams for yourself for the firm when you started?
So frankly, in the beginning, my wife and I left our old firm for various reasons, and I was a partner there. And I planned on retiring at the old firm, but life circumstances took us a different direction. And it wasn't, law firm ownership or business ownership in general was never something that was on my radar. So when we went solo, I was like, I'm gonna keep it simple. Just take referrals and do our own cases, and try and travel and all those sorts of things. And it was like that in the beginning, but as we started to build a caseload, what I was striving for in simplicity turned into me doing everything all the time. So it was actually like more busy than it was before. And that's when I started to look for, some advice. I've always played sports, so I had coaches, had nutritionists, had people that are more experienced in whatever that issue was, whatever that area was, that are guiding me along. So then I started to look for, business advice, and that's how I found, how to manage. And they helped me focus on my mindset. And it wasn't until I started to talk to my CEO and the rest of the C-suite about like what we really wanted, that was when I started to figure that out. Because initially I was like, we have no debt, we own a home, cars are through the business. Like initially I was just like fine with that. But then as we're like working on the mindset and the business and the focus, that's when I decided we want to take this thing more and more nationwide.
Is that your goal now?
It is, yeah. So that's something we're working on with the entire C-suite, where to practice. Because again, like we're in federal court. So we do handle cases on a limited basis throughout the country. And as we're focusing on the systems, and for me, I had to set a little bit of ego aside, like I mentioned earlier. I was like, oh, I'm the best person for this. Like no one else can do it as well. But as we're hiring the various staff, the attorneys, paralegals, legal assistants, the non-revenue generating staff, which should be like executive assistants, various directors of different pieces, I'm seeing that people can do better than me in all these different areas. So that gave us the confidence to go expand and test these things. So initially, we want to cover the Ninth Circuit, which is where we are, the circuit court for California, amongst other states here, and to slowly go east to other states and circuits that we want to practice in.
Well, I appreciate that you have put so much time and effort into being profitable so you can help as many people as possible.
And that's why we're also lucky, as attorneys, and then we have special training, and we can help people in ways that they couldn't otherwise do themselves. So that's, we talk about like working less, but that's a very conscious choice. Like I do need to take steps back to be charged. Otherwise I would work 7 days a week because I do enjoy it. But at a certain point you start to be counterproductive in terms of like spending too much time. But we are blessed and lucky every single day.
Oh, that's so great. Now, did you have to be convinced to try Profit First when you first heard about it? Did it take you a while to jump on it, or were you just kind of like, we'll try it?
No, yeah. No, I mean, for initially hearing about it, you hear about any topic, when in terms of the business. It's like, I know what I've been doing for the past couple of years or a decade or however long you've been doing a certain thing. And like, oh, it's working. So when I was reading it, I started talking about it with my wife, and we were just like, well, kind of like everyone, it won't work for us. Like I see this other type of business where they do have steady cash flow, like they're a flat fee or hourly firm. And then I was like, well, but we're a contingency firm. So sometimes we're making, $500,000 a month or $1 million a month. And sometimes we're making nothing. So that was just like the initial pushback. It's like it just won't work. I don't have that type of business where it will work. And then eventually I was like, you know what? Like worst case scenario, it doesn't work. And we just go back to what we're doing. And again, like what we're doing before is just like guessing. Like maybe there'll be enough money to pay us at the end of the year, a little bit extra. Maybe there won't be. But this is given a structure. So like we do know what's coming through and we can count on it, which I just never saw happening for a contingency firm. I thought the rest of my life, as long as I practiced, it would be the fluctuations. And of course, I'll still have that, but I know the profits will be there. And I know that we're going to be paying ourselves X amount of dollars per month, per quarter, and per year. We can calculate that now.
That's very interesting to me too, because that is one of the things that we've heard, right? Is like, oh, I do contingency, so I can't do profit first. What are some things that you would say if there were a law firm owner who was kind of on the fence, who'd heard about it, but didn't think it would work for them for whatever reason?
Yeah, again, it's just, it is a business. And frankly, like we're not as unique as we think we are as attorneys. Like we're running a business that happens to specialize in law, but we're selling a service or a product. And once you start to take your numbers seriously and actually think about them, get the data, put it into a dashboard or however you want to track it, you'll see that you might see that you are having fluctuations. Maybe they are seasonal. Maybe, it's different marketing, but you'll start to see like whatever's causing the inconsistencies that make you think you're very special and unique. And then you can see that it's actually something you can plan for or address. So beyond that, I feel like, why not try it? See if you can give it a go. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work and you're back to where you started. Best case scenario, you have a drastically better way of life and a drastically better way of doing things.
Yeah. What is one of the, things that you were most excited to do with your distribution? So it's one of the coolest things you've been able to do.
We like to, again, like going back to the girls, because that's where everything always goes. What we plan on doing with them is like traveling to each civilization that they're studying. So they go to a hybrid homeschool, and each year, the entire school from preschool up to high school studies the same civilization, obviously at different levels. So we want to go abroad and see those. So we were focusing more on those international trips. And last summer was really the proof of concept. This has always been in the back of my mind to go do this. But last summer we went to Scandinavia, which was not something they were studying, but we spent time in Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, a couple of weeks abroad. And then I was like, okay, we can do this. We have the cash flow, the systems, the team, where when we come back, it's that the dream of we have more cases than when I left. There's more money in operating than when I left. Cases got settled, cases got pushed forward. So focusing on the teams and the profit allowed us to get away. And now like we want to go, see the civilization. So that's always been the dream of mine.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And your kids are never going to forget those moments, right? Those are the kinds of memories that last a lifetime. I think it is beautiful when you have entrepreneurial parents who also make it a priority and figure out the systems and the processes. I mean, obviously you didn't take this trip by magic, right? You had to put the infrastructure in place to be able to go away and then have a team that you could trust to keep the business moving as you are gone. But it just sounds like such a better life overall.
It is, and for the girls, like we want them to have these memories and we're showing them things. Like we saw the Nobel Museum. We canoed or rafted in fjords in Norway and all these
So
things.
cool.
It was beautiful and amazing, trying to give them like all these memories. But of course, kids being kids, their favorite memory was the bumper cars in Norway because there's absolutely no restrictions. We're not in California anymore. Like those things were cruising. The fjords are great, beautiful, but they remember the bumper cars. So we'll give them the opportunity to have whatever memories they want.
Oh, that's amazing. Matt, I'm so glad that you brought this for us today. And usually my last question of the day is completely separate from everything we've talked about so far. So just, throw that one in the back of your shoulder. My favorite question to ask is, since joining How to Manage a Small Law Firm, what is the most profitable piece of advice that you have taken action on that has made a big improvement to your life and or your business?
It's hard to pick one just because it's been all inclusive. So, I joined in my 30s and now I'm 40. I turned 40 this year. And one of the issues there is, when I'm in my 30s, relatively young still, I don't have a lot of people in my life who are starting businesses. Some people don't really necessarily have their lives sorted out at this point. So for one, it was nice to have that community of other people who are into the same things that I am, and growing the business, into the metrics, into the data, and like being able to bounce ideas off of each other. And a lot of times it's people with the C-suite or RJon or everyone else that's been there, done that. Or it's people in the bubble, the community that are going through the same sorts of things. The community's been massive. The confidence is another piece of it. So when you're hiring someone, salaries are high and that's scary. But, having a team around you from the fractional C-suite that can say, or help you, if I'm going to spend this amount of money, what's the ROI that I should be looking for? And it just makes everything else more concrete. We go from a group of people who are just litigating together to a real business. So it's hard to pick like one aspect of the journey that's been the best because it's been all inclusive. Everything about me and my business has benefited from the guidance.
Yeah. I guess what I'd like to drive at is what's something that you have been able to implement in your firm that maybe somebody who's listening to this can also implement in theirs, separate and apart from Profit First, which everybody should, of course, be implementing if they're not already.
Exactly. Yeah. So systems are, really what makes the world go round. So getting it out of your brain and on paper into a trainual or some sort of manual, like that's going to be step one, in my opinion, for if you want to grow. But it's something you can do before you have a team and should do before you have a team. Because as you grow, your role is going to change and things are going to get hectic. But you start to document your processes, then you'll be more ready to grow when you do bring people on.
Yes. Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I do actually think, we have a pretty good resource for this one. I will drop a link in the show notes below for those listening. If you are not sure where to start with systems and processes, we have some pretty good ones that are guidelines that can help you put something together. If I were going to distill everything that we had talked about so far in this interview, Matt, I would say at least my main 3 takeaways would be: your business is not your baby. It's your mule. And just like any good working farm, right, you cannot do it all alone and accomplish your goals of feeding however many people that you're trying to feed. That the mindset part of having a profitable business is one of the most important aspects. If you, as an entrepreneurial law firm owner, are not taking care of your own mindset around money, around business, around success, around growth, around profit, then you are going to run into various walls, and it is going to prevent you from being able to grow the business as much as you want to. And I would say number 3 from what we've talked about so far today would be, put the infrastructure in place, take the time that you need to test it, right? 30 days emergency access only is how to manage's kind of baseline, right? But do put some infrastructure in place and then take off, leave the business, make sure that it can operate without you and see that it can still grow and thrive and assist your clients, so that you can be the best version of yourself that you can be. Did I miss anything, Matt?
That's beautiful. You've done this before.
Is there anything that you would add that maybe I didn't think to ask?
And this, it goes a little bit into the mindset, but, think about why. To our earlier discussion, as attorneys and law firms, we have the ability to help people in a massive way, whether it's immigration, criminal, trust and estates, us dealing with fraud. Our clients are coming to us in their darkest times, and they need someone that's a well-polished machine that can help them and get them through it in a way that gets them past it, makes sense to them financially. And we just have so much opportunity to do so much good in the world that it makes sense, in my opinion, to grow it and do bigger and better.
Yeah, think about your why. I love the way that you said that, Matt. Thank you. Now, if somebody out there needed some assistance with identity theft or fraud and needed a law firm that would fight for them, how would they find you?
Yeah, we're loker.law for our website. Matt.loker at loker.law is my email. We're on the Instas and all the social medias. I lost track of them. It's always Loker Law, but we're happy to help.
Awesome. Okay, we will put those links in our show notes below as well. Matt, I so appreciate you being on the show today. I got a lot out of this, and congrats for all the big and many moves that you're making, both personally, financially, and professionally.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate it.
All right, folks, that's what we've got for you today. Now, I hope this has been as valuable for you as it has been for me. And of course, stay tuned next time for even more great content. We'll see you there. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Profit First for Lawyers podcast. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, tell a friend and buy your copy of the book at profitfirstforlawyers.com. Your future self will thank you for it, and we will see you next time.